Hi, I'm Greg Euland with Reynolds & Reynolds, and this is Connected. Today is actually part two of a conversation with Sean Reyes, Chief Marketing Officer at Recall Masters. If you missed part one, go back to our last episode from 2 weeks ago and take a listen to that. I'd highly recommend it. It was a good conversation. But for now, let's dive into part two. Hey, Sean. All right, we'll get started with round two here. Thanks again for sitting down and hopping on.
Thank you so much for having me, Greg.
Yep, absolutely. So the last time we ended the episode with you kind of making the case for what sounded like a recall crisis, essentially. So let's go a little deeper on that and talk a little, if you can, about how we got into this state that we're in today and how we got to this recall crisis.
Well, yeah, certainly there's a lot of finger pointing to do. I mean, between the, I think the consumer safety groups and the federal regulators are all pointing fingers at the dealers or the manufacturers or the consumers that don't take action. I mean, the reality is that I'm not, and Recall Masters is not focusing on who's to blame rather than facilitating the solutions that really resolve compliance issues. So I think most consumers and the federal government and the manufacturers want to address this problem. I see everywhere I go that there are willing partnerships to be had, and we just need to make it easier for consumers to comply, and that begins with also assisting our dealers with helping them complete the repairs, because all those solutions are going to come at the local level, Greg.
Yeah, you're right. So let's talk a little bit, Sean. You mentioned it and kind of briefly in our last conversation, technology in cars, right? So you can make the argument really that the vehicles are becoming more computers on wheels than they are, a car or a piece of machinery. And that's not going to slow down, right? As we move more and more towards electric vehicles, as more and more parts of the car are becoming connected, there's just a lot of tech in there. So what are your thoughts on the impact of technology, the impact that has on recalls and what you're seeing?
Right, and we haven't even gotten into self-driving vehicles, which is perhaps the next tidal wave of recalls to come. But at the end of the day, a vast majority of this technology really has made vehicles much safer for the average consumer. So it's great that, again, we're creating safer vehicles today. But yes, at the same time, while my phone continues to require updates and patch upgrades to its operating system, so do our vehicles. So there's a massive wave that really hit 2 years ago where software and electronics surpassed Takata airbags as the largest incidences, not only in total campaigns, but of vehicles impacted. So, that's going to perhaps be eye-opening for a lot of dealerships who need to retrain staff to really, I think that the toolbox of the future is going to look more like a laptop. So but I think that also presents a lot of opportunities for dealerships to attend to more vehicles faster, because those patch upgrades will be much easier to attend to than the parts that need to be replaced.
Yeah, and if the toolbox of the future is a laptop, I'd say the future's already here. I can't tell you the last time I walked a shop and saw a bay that didn't have a computer in it. I mean, it's everything's connected, for sure. So shifting gears to focus a little bit on dealerships, right? And why it's important to them. You've mentioned a couple of times, this stuff is going to end up happening at the local level, which is really valid. And I appreciate that. But from a dealer's perspective, why do I invest in something when the manufacturer, it's kind of their responsibility, right? And there's upside for me, sure, but the manufacturer is doing this type of stuff for free. Why do I need to invest further?
Well, if you're going to rely on the factory to do all the work, then it probably explains why we still have 1 in 4 vehicles on the road today with a dangerous recall. I think it's really up to all of us in the industry, especially if you're taking vehicles in that are off-brand, either in through your service drive or at trade-in. You're probably going to have a greater responsibility to evaluate those vehicles and inform back to the owner that they've got a dangerous vehicle on board. In fact, as a dealership, if you're taking an off-brand in at trade-in, you don't really know what you're getting, right? If you're not checking that vehicle to see if even there's a remedy for that recall or that parts are available, I think it's a risk on you. And especially as vehicles are changing hands at such a rapid rate, even your own brand, there are second, third, fourth generation owners that aren't even aware that they've got a recall, and they're relying on you as the dealership to take care of that, to identify that for them and to repair that recall. And it still surprises me to this day that as many as 5% of those vehicles are still traveling through the service drive and not being informed that they've got a dangerous recall on board.
Yeah, yeah, and I would say, from the consumer's perspective too, dealers have to have a delicate balance to take care of, right? On one hand, you want to make sure that you're getting as much as you can. On the other hand, you don't want to come across as pushy or invasive to the customer. So from what you've seen and thinking about consumers and how they view the recall process, is there, I don't know, the perception might be that there's some level of annoyance around how the recall process happens and what it looks like. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, look at it. It's fair to say that as a consumer, you really don't want to attend to something that you just really don't have time for, right? The consumers are busier than ever. So if they're coming into your service drive to attend to another repair, the last thing you want to do is miss that recall repair, right? So you want that notification. But I think at the same time, the average consumer, in fact, we did this survey, again, I keep talking about this consumer survey, that we have 82%, I think, of consumers that recognize that a recall is really an attempt for the manufacturer to promote safety. That while it was somewhat of an inconvenience, that they saw this as a natural subset of the manufacturing process. And so as long as we make it easy for them, I think most consumers are very appreciative. And in fact, 52% of these recall customers that come in for some other work actually adopt or buy in on additional CP work. And so customer pay revenue is huge for dealerships right now. And then I believe it's another 58% of these consumers will come back for a second visit within 12 months. 6 to 9% of them, Greg, go on to purchase their next vehicle from that attending dealer. So there's a lot for dealerships to gain from also servicing customers. So doing the right thing by consumers turns out to be a very, very profitable thing for dealers.
Yeah, so there's some upside for sure, and there's some correlation between handling recall work and the positives on the backside of it. But I guess sell me. So I'm a dealer, right? My shop, I feel like, is completely full. I'm making more money than I ever have. I handle the recalls that come in, and then I follow up with those customers on recommended work that we found. What else am I going to do?
Well, I mean, the reality is that if you're at capacity, then maybe you've got some questions as to whether you can take on more vehicles. But here's the reality: the consumer is going to take action, whether you're there to assist them or whether they're going to go down the street to another competing dealer. So my feeling is that if you really want to retain these relationships with consumers over the long haul, you've got to attend to them. So you've got to be upfront with them about a possible recall and a repair that's necessary. Our biggest competitor in this industry is complacency. That is, dealers that don't want to do anything, or consumers that don't want to do anything about a dangerous recall. We're all just waiting for an accident to happen. That's not how you manage customers proactively. I think there's so much to gain, but you've got to lead. You've got to have the right data, and you've got to build it into the workflow. And that's why the Reynolds and Reynolds partnership is really, really key in this.
Yeah, it makes sense. But let's talk about that consumer complacency for a second too. So there's maybe a perception, it might be reality, that most customers that come in on a recall or warranty work, either A, they don't care, or B, they're cheap and they're not there to buy anything, and it's really hard to upsell them. Can you talk about those two things a little bit deeper, maybe? So really diving into that consumer complacency aspect of what you were just talking about.
Well, I think if you make it difficult, of course, nobody really wants to attend to that. But, as we surveyed consumers, 81% of these consumers surveyed intended to take care of the problem within the 6 months. So why aren't they attending to these recalls? And the reality is that the recalls are coming on to them faster than their ability to attend to it. So even if I'm checking for a recall last week, I may have a new announcement by next month. So staying on top of that, monitoring that, and being a good monitor for your clients, to be proactively in front of them, to let them know that they've got a dangerous recall and they maybe have to come back into the service center. That's good news for for dealerships that want to have these regular engagements with their consumers. Gives another reason for you to call that customer, bring them back into the shop. That's really important for long-term engagement. It's a really great safety message for a dealer.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. So, Sean, we've covered a lot of ground, talked about a few different angles of this. But I'm curious, is there anything else that maybe has been surprising to you as you've been a part of this recall world, this industry, that you've learned, maybe a takeaway that you want to make sure dealers take away too, something that I don't know, might be under the covers a little bit that surprised you?
Well, I think every dealer is looking for differentiation nowadays. I mean, there's nothing wrong. I mean, you talk about how valuable these relationships are with customers, and go improve it. Go improve it by reaching out to these consumers who are coming into your service drive, relying on you not only to deliver quality service and manufacture parts and skilled technicians, but to safeguard their family from dangerous recalls. I think that's really important. There's also another hidden truth out there that if you and it's not news to dealers that if they're selling a vehicle with an open recall, they usually have signed disclosures that go with that. But those disclosures only protect you at the state level from lemon laws. They don't protect you from product liability laws. So while it's still legal federally for you to sell a used vehicle with an open recall, it might be an admission of guilt in a courtroom setting should that recall turn into an accident or accidentally kill somebody or lead to a bigger issue. That same disclosure could turn out to be an admission of guilt that you willingly and knowingly sold a dangerous product to a consumer. So I think that's news for a lot of dealers that don't realize that that there is inherent risk to selling any car, off-brand, on-brand, with a dangerous recall. So you don't need to take that risk. What it could cost you and the possible life of the consumer in your neighborhood. This is not a reputation issue. This is about whether you're doing the most responsible thing for our industry and to assist these consumers. I think that's a very important message that we shouldn't overlook.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, so I think the takeaway is it's really in everyone's best interest, right? It's
Right.
Certainly the dealership, certainly the consumer, certainly every party involved has upside. So definitely appreciate that. Well, Sean, been a good conversation. What haven't we talked about that we should? Anything else you want to touch on before we head off?
No, not anything. I mean, certainly I could talk for days and days and days about recalls. We didn't even get into the legislative issues that are perhaps a menacing dark cloud in the distance. But I think at the same time, the solutions are really going to come from our industry and thinking beyond, outside of the box, and helping our federal government address the needs and concerns of consumers at large. So I'd rather be a more willing partner to help orchestrate that and architect those solutions. I think dealers are certainly willing partners, as well as the manufacturers. So I think the solutions are before us. I don't think we need to head into legislative deep waters. That tends to not really produce much for the average consumer. So I think we're ready to take those steps now.
All right, good deal. Well, Sean, thank you again for joining. I had a great conversation. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Greg.
All right, we'll see you. It was great talking with Sean today. And remember, this was part 2 of a 2-part series. So if you missed the first episode, go back and check it out from 2 weeks ago. Before we hop off, don't forget you can watch or listen to episodes of Connected on YouTube, Apple, or Spotify podcasts. And make sure to hit subscribe so you're notified every other week when new episodes are released. We'll see you in 2 weeks.